Welcome to Time of Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murders of Tyron Lamar Bigum, who was shot and killed on Saturday, August 11, 2001 in the 13,500 block of San Pedro Street in Willowbrook, and Adiel Casada, who was shot and killed on Friday, July 25, 2008 in the 13,800 block of Avalon Boulevard in Willowbrook, according to LA County coroner records. Dennis Wallace, Raymond Gibbs, and Dia Khalil were subsequently arrested and charged with the murders. The following is the evidence at trial. On August 10, 2001, at approximately 10:30 p.m., Taylor was living in a duplex on San Pedro Street, which was frequented by the 1-5 Piru gang. Taylor was at home with his brother and his friend victim Bigum. Taylor had seen defendants Khalil and Wallace in the neighborhood during the 5 years he had lived there. On several occasions, defendant Wallace had asked Taylor where he was from, and Taylor responded that he did not gangbang and was from nowhere. Taylor and victim Bigum were not gang members, and Taylor did not associate with a gang. At some point, Taylor and victim Bigum went outside to the front yard and walked towards Bigum's brown Caprice. A female joined them. As Taylor, Bigum, and the woman stood near the trunk of the car, Taylor saw a white Nissan Altima that he had seen all the time. The Altima was coming from Piru Street and slowed down as it passed Taylor and Bigum. Taylor saw 4 people in the car. He could not clearly see the people in the back of the car, but he could see the 2 people sitting in the front seat. Defendant Wallace was the driver, and defendant Khalil, known as K9, was in the passenger seat. As the Altima drove by, Taylor heard someone in the car say they get a pass. The car drove past Taylor and his friends and continued down the street. Several minutes later, after the female had departed, Taylor saw the Altima again. The Altima went across San Pedro Street and stopped near an alley. Taylor could see that defendants Wallace and Khalil were still in the front seat of the car. A person wearing a black hoodie got out of the back seat of the car and walked to the corner. The person began shooting, and Taylor ran towards his house and Bigum in another direction. Taylor jumped over his fence, ran into the back, and entered his house. Taylor told his brother that someone was shooting at him. A short time later, Taylor heard a knock on the door. When Taylor opened the door, he saw Bigum, who had been hit by gunshots. Bigum fell to the ground and Taylor called 911. Bigum later died from his gunshot wounds. LA County Sheriff's Deputy Richard White responded to the area. At the time, victim Bigum was being treated by paramedics. Deputy White attempted to speak to him, but he was unable to do so. Deputy White surveyed the area and observed bullet strikes on the nearby Caprice and a fence. He also found 18 expended shell casings that were spread out in the yard. The recovered casings were 7.62 by 39mm rounds and were all fired from the same weapon. Deputy White questioned Taylor, who was distraught, and said that he had seen 4 African American males in the car and that he saw the shooter, who was also an African American male. Taylor said he turned and ran. When Taylor spoke with police, he did not tell him that he saw defendant Wallace's Altima or that he had seen defendant Wallace driving the Altima. Taylor did not mention the identities of the suspects because he still lived in the neighborhood and feared that they would return and kill him. The following day, defendants Wallace and Khalil, along with 2 others, went to Taylor's house in a white Caprice. Defendant Wallace asked Taylor what had happened the previous day. Taylor said that he did not know what happened. The men suggested that perhaps the Mexicans had been involved in the shooting. Taylor was uncomfortable because he knew who had committed the shooting. Taylor moved from the area after the shooting. He believed that snitches who talked to police got beat up or killed. On August 13, 2001, Detective Frank Salerno interviewed Taylor over the phone. At that time, Taylor indicated that someone named Dennis was the person who drove the Altima. Taylor had not seen anyone else drive that car. On August 14, 2001, Detective Salerno again interviewed Taylor, who said that he had seen the Altima on prior occasions. Taylor stated that he saw the Altima a second time when it crossed San Pedro Street. The shooter exited the back seat of the car. Taylor further relayed to Detective Salerno what had occurred the day after the shooting when defendants went to his house. At some point later, Taylor mentioned to Detective Salerno that the other person in the car was K9. Taylor said that defendants Wallace and Khalil were members of 1-5, which meant they were members of the 1-5 Piru gang. Taylor said that defendant Wallace was the driver and that Khalil had been the passenger in the front seat. Detective Salerno checked department resources and uncovered one person in the 1-5 Piru gang named Dennis and someone else in the gang, Khalil, with the nickname K9. Detective Salerno also investigated whether defendant Wallace had any connection to a white Nissan. He discovered that a white Nissan was registered to defendant Wallace's mother. Detective Salerno located photographs of defendants Wallace and Khalil and placed them into photographic lineups. He then showed them to Taylor. In one photographic lineup, Taylor identified defendant Wallace as the owner of the Nissan Altima and one of the people he had seen on the night of the shooting. In another photographic lineup, Taylor identified defendant Khalil as the passenger in the Altima. Taylor was certain of his identifications. On September 5, 2001, Detective Salerno and his partner, Detective Robinson, notified defendants Wallace and Khalil that they were under investigation for the murder of Bigum. On that date, the Sheriff's Department conducted a search of defendant Wallace's residence, which was approximately 4 blocks south of where the shooting had occurred. At that time, defendant Khalil was also in the residence. In a bedroom closet, deputies recovered a magazine for an AK-47 that was loaded with 7.62 by 39mm rounds. A fingerprint analysis was conducted on the magazine and rounds, but no fingerprints were recovered. A white Nissan Altima was located at the residence and impounded. The murder went unsolved until 2010. On July 25, 2008, Buchanan lived near the area of 139th Street and Avalon Boulevard in the city of Los Angeles. Defendant Khalil, whom Buchanan knew as K9, lived nearby. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Buchanan heard something that sounded like gunshots. He went outside and got into a vehicle with his friend. 3 to 5 minutes later, Buchanan saw a male clad in a hoodie running past the car as if he had done something. The male ran across the street and stood on the sidewalk. The man eventually got into a black Chevy Tahoe that was driving by, and the Chevy then drove away. LA County Sheriff's Deputy Jerry Montenegro went to Avalon Boulevard in response to a 911 call. Deputy Montenegro saw a male Hispanic, victim Casada, bleeding from apparent gunshot wounds to his body. Paramedics unsuccessfully tried to resuscitate the victim, who was pronounced dead at the scene. Deputy Montenegro saw 12 9mm and 5 40 caliber shell casings spread about the scene near the victim. He also found 5 expended bullets. The casings were all examined, and it was determined that the 12 9mm shell casings were all fired from the same firearm, and the 40 caliber casings were all fired from another firearm. Victim Casada died from multiple gunshot wounds. He had 13 gunshot wounds that resulted in 22 holes in his body. Out of the 13 gunshot wounds, 3 of them were fatal. The nature of the bullet wounds were consistent with the shooter or shooters standing over the victim while firing the shots. 8 projectiles were recovered from the victim's body. 4 of the projectiles were 9mm and could have been fired from the same weapon, such as a Glock. The remaining 4 projectiles were all 40 caliber Smith & Wesson ammunition that was fired from the same firearm. Israeli Military Industries manufactured a firearm, the Desert Eagle or Baby Eagle, with the same general rifling characteristics found on the 40 caliber projectiles. Victim Casada belonged to the Southside Players gang and used the moniker Stomper. The place where the victim lived and was killed was claimed by Barrio 13. Detective Michael Valento responded to the area where the victim was killed and noticed gang graffiti, including graffiti by the Southside Players and B13, on the walls of an alley behind the apartment complex where the victim was killed. There was no graffiti by the 1-5 Piru gang. Samuel Feza was a former member of the 1-5 Piru gang. Defendants were also members of 1-5. Defendant Wallace had the moniker Poke, Defendant Khalil had the moniker K9, and Defendant Gibbs had the moniker Peanut. Feza lived fairly close to where victim Casada was killed and could get there by car in approximately 5 to 7 minutes. Feza had been to Defendant Khalil's house and had seen several guns, including a 9mm handgun, a Desert Eagle 40, and a 9mm with an extended clip. Feza worked as an informant for Sheriff Detective Sean Shaw, who gave Feza a couple of $1,000 in increments. Detective Shaw also gave Feza a Toyota Tercel to drive. Feza received other benefits for being an informant, such as having one case disappear and being released when he was pulled over by sheriff's deputies. In March 2009, Feza was arrested and charged with burglary, narcotic sales, and gang conspiracy. In August of 2009, Detective Valento conducted a proffer interview with Feza and a prosecutor. As part of the procedure, Feza entered into a proffer agreement, which promised that the information Feza gave during the interview would not be used against him. In the Proffer interview, Feza stated that on the night of victim Casada's murder, Feza told defendants that Casada was not a member of the rival gang Barrio 13. He also told Detective Valento, quote, K9 said that he's finna be gone for the rest of his life. He's about to be gone for the rest of his life, end quote. When Detective Valento asked Feza what defendant Khalil was referring to when he said that, Feza answered, quote, that little kid that got killed, end quote. Feza was consistent that he spoke to defendants Khalil and Gibbs about the murder. He was also consistent in reporting that defendant Khalil and Wallace drove by and, quote, saw Sario slipping. That defendant Khalil and Wallace returned to Khalil's house and talked to the homies. That defendants walked to Avalon Boulevard. That defendant Khalil asked victim Casada where he was from. That defendants Khalil and Gibbs were the shooters and defendant Wallace was the lookout. That a 9mm and a Desert Eagle 40 were used. That defendants ran back to Khalil's house and that defendant Wallace got into a Chevy Tahoe and drove away. Approximately 1 month later, Feza entered into a leniency agreement. Under the terms of the agreement, Feza pled guilty to the charges against him and agreed to testify in defendant's case as well as in another unrelated murder case. Feza will remain in custody until the preliminary hearings in both cases had occurred. Once Feza was released from custody, he was relocated. In July 2011, he was arrested for the murder of Davion Childs. Feza received no leniency in that case. The parties stipulated that Feza was guilty of the murder of Davion Childs, who was killed in a drive-by shooting on January 3, 2008. Detective Duncan testified as a gang expert. He opined that defendants and Feza were all members of the 1-5 Piru gang. In August of 2001, one rival of the 1-5 included the Nutty Block Crips. Victim Bigum was a legacy member of the Nutty Block Crips, as he was the son of a well-known Nutty Block gang member, Michael Tresvant. Detective Duncan believed that it would have been a pretty good score for a 1-5 Piru gang member to kill the son of Michael Tresvant. In July of 2008, the number one rival of the 1-5 Piru gang was Barrio 13. Detective Duncan did not believe that victim Casada was a member of Barrio 13. In an amended information filed by the LA District Attorney, defendants Dennis Wallace, Raymond Gibbs, and Diya Khalil were charged in count 1 with the murder of Adiel Casada. In count 2, Wallace and Khalil were charged with the murder of Tyron Bigum. As to both counts, it was further alleged that a principal personally and intentionally discharged a firearm causing the deaths. A special circumstance of multiple murder was also alleged. In count 3, Wallace and Khalil were charged with the attempted murder of Taylor. Defendants pled not guilty and denied the allegations. Following the trial, the jury convicted defendants of the charged offenses, found the murders in counts 1 and 2 to be first-degree murders, and found the allegations to be true. The court sentenced Wallace and Khalil to life in prison without the possibility of parole on counts 1 and 2, plus 2 terms of 25 years to life for the allegations. For count 3, Wallace was sentenced to state prison for life plus 11 years. Gibbs was sentenced to 50 years to life for count 1, consisting of 25 years to life for the murder and 25 years to life for the allegation. Tyron Lamar Bigum was 22 years old at the time of death. Adiel Casada was 17 years old at the time of death.